Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make these Ugg-inspired boots for a stuffed animal. These have been highly requested and are perfect for fall, so let's get started! Okay, so the very first step is to cut out all the pieces we need. So here are the patterns I made. I actually adapted this from a My Froggy Stuff video, and she made Uggs for dolls. So I used that video as inspiration for these patterns, and I'll have them linked below. And I'm going to next cut these out of some tan felt. I feel like the texture is really similar to Uggs and we don't have to worry about fraying on the edges. Now I'm just pinning on the patterns and cutting out one of each. Okay, this next part is optional, but if you want to add some extra realism and coziness to these boots, you can add a fuzzy layer to the inside, and I'm going to be using white sherpa since I already had some. So I just cut out the same exact patterns as before, except I didn't do the bottom sole. I wasn't sure if I wanted to add it later, but I ended up just skipping it. But now what I'm going to do is trim a little bit off each side so that it is a little bit smaller than the original pattern. And I feel like this does waste a little extra material, so I will leave just smaller versions of the patterns so you don't have to do this trimming way, but you can use whatever way you prefer if you end up doing this. And once they're all trimmed up, matching them up with the original patterns, they should look like this. I do want a couple millimeters of that tan felt showing around each edge, so if there are any edges that are a little bit too big of the sherpa, I'm just trimming that. And once they're all the same size, I'm gluing the sherpa onto the felt. And felt pretty much looks the same on both sides, but you can pick the good side, and that should be the side without the sherpa. I'm just using regular liquid Elmer's glue for this, and it works pretty well and will also add a little more structure to the boot. So even if you're not using the sherpa, you'll still want to brush each piece with glue except for the edges. After doing this to all the pieces, you'll want to give it some time to dry, but it is possible to move on to the next step without it fully dry. The next step is to take the two pieces that aren't just a plain rectangle and match up their kind of quarter circle curves. And here's the part where I'd usually say good side to good side, but in this case it's actually bad side to bad side, so the sherpa should be on the inside. And I did attempt to pin these two together, but I think just the glue and everything, I really could not get through it, so I'm just going to hold this in place and sew right along these curves. I meant to leave like a millimeter or two of seam allowance so, it doesn't get too close to the edge, but the thickness of the sherpa makes that a little bit difficult, so just try your best to not get it so close to the edge that it just falls apart. So as you can see, I got really close with mine. Luckily it's still holding together, but I did leave such a big gap on the inside with the sherpa that I should have gone further away just to be safe, but I tried to do that better with the other boot. I know it passed really quick, but having that seam face out like that is really what gives it that Ugg look. Next, I can grab that rectangle piece and line up the short edges of that with the straight edge of the piece we just sewed. And if they don't match up exactly, you can leave the extra on that bottom edge because later you can always just trim it off, but I do want the top edge to be a little bit cleaner. And before I sew anything, I'm just making sure that the sherpa isn't sticking out too much because I don't want it poking out through the seams and showing from the outside. And now I can pin together the other side and then just sew where I've pinned. Once that's done, here's what it looks like. I did a little bit of a better job making that seam thicker. And if any parts are looking uneven or too thick, you can always trim them at the end. And I'm going in and just trimming the top edge a little bit. I actually originally wanted to fold over this edge over the sherpa, but I didn't like how short it would end up being and that there would be a stitch line at the top. And doing this while it's all sewn together in a circle is not ideal, so I figured that I would just leave that edge raw and just make the whole thing easier. Okay, next I'm finally going to sew this to the bottom sole, and this is probably the hardest part, but it's almost done after this. You'll just want to make sure that that front curve is facing forward, and then line that up in the shoe shape so it's all pointing in the right direction. And now I'm just pinning them together around the edge. And if the bottom sole ends up being too big for that top piece, you can always trim it. But if the sole is too small, you should definitely cut out just a slightly bigger piece for the sole because if you don't, you'll have to kind of scrunch that extra fabric in the back. And to me, that doesn't look the best. Now I'm going to sew this all the way around as neat as possible, trying to make sure I don't leave any gaps, but if that does happen, which did happen to me in multiple places, you'll just have to go over those parts again so there aren't any holes. and even if the stitching is a bit messy, I feel like it's not super noticeable. Now I'm just doing a final trim around the edges to get everything smoothed out. Now I need to make a solid base for this, so my stuffed animals are going to be able to stand up while wearing them. So I'm just taking a piece of corrugated cardboard and tracing the outside of the boot, and you can always use the same pattern you used for the sole of the shoe. I just feel like this is more accurate to whatever size it ends up being, so I just prefer to trace it. And I'm going to use this first one as a pattern to cut out more since I want a pretty thick sole like an Ugg. And at first I only did 2, but ended up doing a third one since I wanted it pretty thick. Next, I can just stack and glue all the pieces together, so the 2 pieces of cardboard, and then I later added a third one, and then adding the felt Ugg on top of that. I tried to use these binder clips to really squeeze everything together, but these little ones were too small, so this would be a good thing to just do with 1 layer of cardboard and the boot, but 2 layers of cardboard was too thick. So instead, I'm trying to really press down on the middle and all the edges, and then I can let it dry. Okay, here it is with the 3rd layer of cardboard I added later, and now the final step is to just clean up this edge with a piece of tan craft foam. So I'm just measuring the height of the cardboard base, and that was about 1 centimeter, so I can mark that down and cut it out. And then I can just glue it around the base. Now watch as I flawlessly apply this to the boot. Okay, well, we all knew that was bound to happen. Hopefully there's enough glue on it to still stick on, and once I wrapped it around to the back, I added a little piece of tape to kind of hold it in place while it dried. Now I'm going to go make a second one of these and be right back. Okay, so it's actually a week later and I did change my nails to this pumpkin theme, which I love, and it kills me that I couldn't have filmed the whole video like this, but I did finally make that second Ugg, and so now we can do the final try on. I asked my sister for advice on how to style this since I myself don't have Uggs, but she does, and she suggested an oversized sweater and leggings, so I put on these stretchy pants from Build-A-Bear, and I have a video on how to make this crochet sweater. And I feel like it needed a little girly touch, so I added these white ribbon pigtails to her ears. And of course, the freshly made Uggs will complete the look. Now that's it for this video. I really hope you all enjoyed it and try it out. It would be great if you could give this video a like, comment any suggestions you have, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time. Bye! You'll want to brush each You'll still want to brush each piece. You'll still want to brush each piece with glue, leaving the edges open. You'll want to brush each piece. You'll still want to brush each piece with glue, leaving the You'll still want to brush each piece with glue except for the edges.